Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Felix, a New York Player's novel, by Lulu Moore. Narrated by Patrick Zeller and Monica King. Prologue. Felix. What makes you happy? What makes your world turn? What gives your life purpose? 3 months ago, I would have said the ice, winning, my friends, my boys, my godchildren. But now, her. Out of the darkness comes the light. And that's what she was. The light when everything else was dark. The light I didn't realize I'd been searching for. The absolute best time of the absolute worst time. The silver lining on my cloud. The calm in my storm. The love of my life. But the course of true love never did run smooth, because love needs to evolve, adjust, become resilient. And for love to survive, for love to truly stand the test of time, to become that gut-wrenching, heart-aching, world-turning, once-in-a-lifetime love, it needs to fight. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make her realize that my reason to be, my raison d'etre, is her. My day stops and starts with her, only her, and I'm going to show her we are stronger than the adversity, for as long as we have each other, we can take on anything. And that'll start as soon as I get her to talk to me again. Because right now, our love is nothing more than Russian roulette, with my finger on the trigger and the bullseye over my heart.
Chapter 1. Molly. My feet were killing me, and I desperately needed a massage and a foot rub. I'd just finished 7 hours of reconstructive knee surgery on 3 different patients, but thankfully my shift was about to finish so I could go home and get into a nice, hot bath. I pushed open the door to the attendance lounge to find a couple of my surgical colleagues with their feet up, watching ads on the television. I headed straight to the coffee machine, only to find the pot empty. Guys, seriously, how hard is it to refill this when you're done? I waved around at them. Ignored. Typical. It's gotta be broken. Hunter Reyes, one of the more arrogant surgeons in my program, turned to Jameson Bentley, his partner in crime. The pair of them were rarely seen apart, usually surrounded by a gaggle of nursing students or surgical interns, all stroking their egos way more than was ever necessary. They stroked each other's enough that no one else needed to bother. Yeah, $50, the knee's twisted too. Jameson shook his hand, agreeing on their bet. They both sat forward, leaning on their thighs as the Rangers game came back on the television. But instead of the game playing out, the team wasn't in position and I could see them all standing against the boards. I looked over at the pair of them glued to the screen, mesmerized. What's going on? I glanced back up at the game. I could see Jasper, my brother, and Drew standing around as the team doctors were working, getting the stretcher ready to take someone off the ice. This didn't look good. Nervous energy started swirling around like a whirlwind inside me, and it had nothing to do with the knowledge that I held, certain that what was playing out on the screen would lead to surgery. Or maybe it did, but just not in the way I normally felt it. What's going on? Ignored again. I walked over to the screen, blocking their view. Guys, what's going on? Jameson peered around me. Mom, move out of the way. There was a big fight and cleverly got slammed into the boards by Devin Walls. They're checking him out, but it's not good. I turned in time to watch a slow-mo of the body check play out. I tugged on my necklace, running the charm along the chain as I watched, my blood running cold. Hunter leaned back on the couch with a grimace, his arms going behind him. Fuck. Yeah, he's definitely out for a while. I pointed to the screen. Felix? That's Felix? Felix is down? It was possible I'd reached the pitch of a wailing banshee, but they only looked at me as they would a fly buzzing around their head. Ah, look at you trying to be on first-name terms. I rolled my eyes. Is that Felix? But I could see for myself it was. I raced over to the phone which hung on the wall and dialed the emergency room. This was the preferred hospital for all of New York's sports teams due to its award-winning sports surgery program, and I knew they'd be bringing him here. Emergency, someone answered. Hi, it's Dr. Molly Marks from the surgical floor. Can you page me as soon as Felix Cleverly is brought in? Yeah, sure. What's the issue? I turned back to the idiots in front of the television. Hunter, you said you thought he'd broken something, right? I called over. No response. Hunter? He sighed, but didn't look my way. Yeah, I reckon. Possible break of something. I confirmed with the guy on the other end of the line. Yes, sure, Dr. Marks. We'll get a bed set up. I hung up and dialed the nurse's station. Hi, it's Dr. Marks. Can you book OR2 for me, please? I'll need it in an hour or so. Yes, certainly. Dr. Marks, who's the patient? Felix Cleverly, from the New York Rangers. I don't know the injury yet. No problem. I turned back to the room to find Hunter leaning against the couch staring at me. Molly, what do you think you're doing? Prepping for surgery. What did it sound like? His arms crossed over his broad chest. No, you're not. Your shift is finishing. Yeah, there was no fucking way I was leaving this hospital anytime soon. I stared him down. No, I'm staying to do this surgery. Jameson moved to stand next to Hunter, the pair of them trying to pin me with a glare I assumed they thought was intimidating. But I'd grown up with Cooper, so very little intimidated me. Molly, what makes you think you can just come in and take the good surgeries? Apart from the fact that I'm better than you? I stated, my eyebrow raised at them, waiting. To be fair, I wasn't expecting an answer. He's one of my best friends. Who? Felix. Hunter took on an expression of someone trying to do long-form algebra in their head. What? I tapped my index finger on my chin. Well, technically, my brother's best friend. What? I pointed to the screen where Cooper, Drew, and Jasper were still standing over Felix as he was being lifted onto the stretcher. My brother. I watched as their heads moved in unison between me and the screen, and back again. Cooper Marks is your brother. I nodded. Jameson blinked several times before a crease appeared on his forehead. Molly, we've known each other 12 years. How did we not know that? I shrugged. Because you always have your heads stuck up your asses, and it's surprising you can hear anything over the One Direction level squeals of your stupid intern fan club every time you walk past. Now, if one of you wants to assist, go and get changed. But this is my surgery. I didn't wait for their response before I ran out of the door toward the locker rooms, grabbing some new scrubs from the laundry cupboard on the way. The long soak I'd planned for tonight would have to wait. Instead, I stripped down and jumped into a cold shower to freshen up and blast my tiredness away. After drying off, I quickly dressed and headed for the emergency room. It was so far away from the surgical floor that by the time I got there, the ambulance had pulled up with Felix inside. The team doctors who'd traveled over with him wheeled him through on the stretcher, his leg already secured in a brace. Hello, I'm Dr. Marks, orthopedic attending. I greeted them before looking at Felix, whose face was contorted in pain. I brushed his hair away from his forehead, feeling his clammy skin. Lex, it's Molly. He looked up at me, the cerulean blue eyes I knew so well focused on mine, clearly full of pain. His pupils weren't overly large, and I gave a silent thanks that it was unlikely he had a head injury. Molly, he grunted. Fuck. It fucking hurts. Make it stop. Don't worry, I will. I squeezed his clenched fist, turning back to his doctors walking alongside the stretcher and toward the bed which had been held for him. What happened? Felix grunted again as they lifted him off the board and onto the bed. I pulled the curtains around him. He was checked hard against the boards. He's got an open femur break, replied one of the team doctors. An ER nurse was hooking Felix up to a saline IV, while another released the straps that had been holding him in place and pulled the blankets back off his body. His hockey pants had been cut along the front, and I could see a clean break in the bone, puncturing his skin. I ground my jaw. It would have taken an incredible amount of force to break him like that. Has he had any pain meds?
Just 10 cc's of morphine,
his other doctor replied. Okay. I turned to the nurse as she was cutting the rest of Felix's clothes off him. Start him on antibiotics, get him a CT to check for other injuries, then up to the surgical floor. There's already an OR prep for him. And make sure that jersey goes in a bag with his stuff. I don't want anyone thinking they can take it as a souvenir. Yes, Dr. Marks. I turned back to the doctors. I need to go upstairs and get prepped. I can show you a private area you can wait in if you'd like.
Thank you, but we need to get back to the arena. A couple of our colleagues are on the way, however. We'll let them know.
Okay. Tell them to come to the surgical floor. If they go to the nurse's station, they'll get shown where they can wait.
Great. Thank you.
They held their hands out and I shook them. Don't worry. He's in good hands here. I'll take care of him. I leaned over Felix, who was now covered by a surgical gown. Hey, I'm gonna go upstairs and get ready. I'll see you up there, okay? I'm going to fix this. He nodded, his eyes slightly more glazed, his pain meds having kicked in. I kissed his cheek and left him in the hands of the nurses so they could prep him for the CT scan and bring him up to surgery, where I would fix him. Because I would fix him. I took off down the hallway. The whirlwind of nervous energy had turned into a tornado, twisting my guts in its spin. I ducked into the nearest bathroom, checking the rest of the stalls were empty before I stopped in one, closing the door behind me and sat down on the toilet seat. I let out the choked sob and hot tears I'd been swallowing since I'd first seen the accident. First seen Felix's face screwed up in pain. Since he asked me to make it stop. Being the sister of a professional hockey player, not to mention an orthopedic surgeon, I'd seen more than most people's fair share of horrific sports injuries, broken bones, and mangled joints. In fact, I thrived off it, the worse the better, knowing I could put people back together like a jigsaw puzzle, and the adrenaline rush from that hit me harder than dropping from the new roller coaster at Six Flags. But this one, Felix, knowing I was responsible for getting him back on the ice, that responsibility hung heavy, gripping my heart in its cold fist and squeezing tight. But I'd been right when I'd told Hunter and Jameson that I was the best, because I was. I was the youngest female orthopedic surgeon in the history of the hospital, and I wasn't about to allow anyone else to touch him. I tore off some toilet paper and blew my nose, loudly, before opening the door. The bathroom was still empty, and I stood looking at myself hard in front of the mirror. Get your fucking shit together, Molly. I stared myself down. Start acting like a fucking surgeon. I threw some water on my face, gasping at the cold temperature. It did the trick. My head was clear. I walked back onto the surgical floor to find Jameson and Hunter both standing by the nurse's station. They turned around as I reached them. So, which one of you two is joining me?
That would be me,
Hunter replied. All right. I leaned over the counter to the nurse going through charts. Hey, Betty, how are you? She looked up at me with a smile. I'm good, Molly. Thank you for the cookies you brought in. They were so good. I grinned at her. I know, right? My grandfather used to make them for my brother and me when we were little. They're the best. I'll bring some more in for you soon. I just want to check that everything is set for OR2. Yes, it's booked for you. The ER team called and they've taken your patient to CT, and then he'll be right up for pre-surgery prep. You're the best. Thank you. Some of the Rangers' physicians will be coming up fairly soon. Could you please send them to a private waiting room when they get here? No problem, she said as she handed me a chart. Here's the paperwork. I flipped through the pages and pages of surgery and insurance documentation, signing where I needed to, handing them back when I was done. Thanks, Betty. I looked at Hunter. Ready?
Yeah, let's go.
He followed me as I walked away. What does Jameson get if you're doing this?
James is taking the new nurse in pediatrics on a date.
I looked up at him as I dodged an orderly rolling a giant cart of bedding. You know that sleeping with the interns and nurses isn't in your job description, right?
I know. It's just an added bonus.
He nudged my shoulder with his.
Anyway, how come you never told us who your brother was?
I shrugged. I've never hidden it. He's been here plenty of times. You just don't pay attention to anyone who doesn't want to sleep with you.
That's not true. You wanted to sleep with me once.
I did sleep with you once. I placed my hand on the scanner pad, allowing us access to the operating wing, pushing through the doors.
That was 8 years ago, and I've learned some new moves since then.
My mind flashed back to the night Hunter and I had performed our first surgery together. A car accident victim, and we'd been tasked with holding limbs. We didn't actually get to cut or fix anything, but it was still incredibly cool. And in the aftermath of excitement, we'd ended up getting in a tangled mess ourselves. But, like many things in life, it didn't bear repeating. I may as well have sucked on a lemon by the way my body convulsed. Save them for your fan club. He laughed loudly. We turned, hearing the doors swing open, and watched as Felix's bed was wheeled down the corridor en route to the operating room. I stopped it from passing us, peering down at his face as he blinked up at me through very glazed, but no less piercing, eyes.
Ma.
Hey. His perfect forehead creased in confusion.
What are you doing here?
I'm going to fix you.
Okay.
His eyes closed. I stood back and watched them wheel him off. One of the surgical nurses was walking toward us, carrying a large envelope. Are those Felix Cleverly's x-rays? Yes, doctor, she replied as she handed them to me. I took out the film and held it up to the light, Hunter looking at it with me.
It's good. It's a really clean break. This is a simple mend.
He leaned in closer, squinting, before pointing to a barely there mark on Felix's left patella.
But look at that.
I brought the film nearer to my face. There was a hairline fracture on the bone, but underneath, I could just make out a tiny tear in his anterior cruciate ligament, or ACL, the ligament which helped keep his knee stable, connecting his femur to his tibia. This was almost worse than the break and easily just as painful. It would definitely require surgery to fix. Fuck, Hunt.
Ma, we can fix that another time. We'll get a camera in, check it, and stabilize it for now. He won't be moving much anyway, and then we can fix it properly in 6 weeks or so.
That he was right didn't make it any easier. Yeah, okay.
It'll be fine. Come on, we need to change and scrub in.
15 minutes later, we were standing at the giant stainless steel sinks, thoroughly washing our hands, forearms, and between our fingers, all foaming pink with medical soap, while we watched through the windows as the surgical team set Felix up, ready to be operated on. He was already under, the anesthesiologist sitting by his head, monitoring him carefully. Surgical nurses and residents were prepping Felix's huge body, moving it into position, keeping his right leg to the side and hoisted out of the way, so we could work on his left. Even under the surgical sheets, you could see the sheer size of him, the heaviness of his thighs, the width of his chest, and he was easily one of the bigger professional athletes I'd ever had on the table. Static X-ray machines were placed either side of his left leg, as well as hovering above so that we could constantly monitor his bones in real time, making sure the broken pieces aligned properly, while I inserted the metal rod through them to help them heal. And then again, when I screwed it into place. To the side, I could see the technician setting up the instrument trays with hammers, drills, drill bits, scalpels, and metal wires. To the untrained eye, it could easily be mistaken for some type of Quentin Tarantino-style torture equipment. But all of it was necessary for me to get Felix back on the ice as soon as humanly possible. A resident was fixing his x-rays to the light box hanging on the wall, next to which was the screen to monitor the constant progress. 2 nurses walked in to help us, fitting Hunter and me with surgical masks and tying our gowns, before holding open gloves for us to slide our hands into. We're ready for you, doctors. Thank you. Ready? I turned to Hunter.
Let's go.
We pushed through the doors together and into the room, everyone wordlessly getting into their places as if they'd practiced it 1,000 times, which a lot of them had. Because this was a teaching hospital, we allowed doctors from all levels to watch the surgeries in the galleries above each operating room. Today was no different. In fact, it appeared even fuller than usual. No doubt, news of Felix's accident had made its way around the hospital, the gossip train here rivaling the speed of a space rocket at blastoff. In order to keep Felix under for as little time as possible, there were 2 teams of residents and their interns in the operating room, each designated to work on different stages of the procedure simultaneously. While the interns were there to mostly observe and learn, the residents would be on hand to monitor Felix, hold his massive leg still while I bored into it, or close up his wounds while I created new ones, all accomplished with military timing and precision. I walked around the table and started inspecting the instrument tray, a superstitious habit of mine from med school, turning each one round on its axis. Oh my god, even unconscious, Felix cleverly is so hot. Let's hope that sheet accidentally slips during surgery so we can get a glimpse of the famous bod underneath. A voice whispered too loudly. Out! I put down the drill bit I'd been examining and looked up at the interns, identifying the one who'd spoken because she turned bright red, stood stock still, unblinking. The entire surgical staff was staring at me as I waited for her to move, my eyes the only part of my face visible, making my anger all the more pronounced. Did I not speak clearly enough? Get out of my OR. Dr. Marks, she spluttered. I apologize. Hunter didn't need to see my face to know how I felt, and he would back me up, because even though we squabbled regularly, if there was one thing he hated, it was disrespect and insubordination in the OR. You heard Dr. Marks. Out. Now. If you can't have respect for the patients, there's no place for you in here. Go and wait in my office. Everyone watched as she hesitated with arguing, before realizing that Hunter wasn't kidding, and she stormed out. I think it was part of his appeal, aside from his movie star looks. He was extremely good at his job and took it very seriously, and wouldn't suffer anyone who didn't. Hunter turned to face me, his voice quiet. Okay, Ma. You're up. I took a deep breath, absorbing the calm of the room, before looking down at Felix as I counted back from 5, moving into position at his side. All right, music on, please. I held my hand out. 10 blade. The surgical nurse handed it to me as my signature startup tune of Welcome to the Jungle with the ever-familiar guitar riff blared out, and I zoned in to make the first incision in Felix's thigh with no hesitation. 2.5 hours later, I ripped off my mask and scrub gown as I walked out of the OR, throwing them in the hazardous waste disposal. I turned on the faucets to wash my hands again, not blinking while I watched the surgical team finish dressing his wounds, cleaning him up before they took him through to post-op where they'd bring him back to consciousness. I looked down at my shaking hands, trying to stop them as I rubbed soap across them. But I couldn't. Hunter joined me at the sink. You okay? I focused on scrubbing my fingernails, digging underneath them. Yes, I'm good. It wasn't like I'd just performed brain surgery or anything. It was the injury of a 7-year-old boy who'd fallen out of a tree, and I'd fixed it the same way I'd fixed dozens of other broken femurs. I could do it with my eyes closed. The surgery had gone well. No, it had been great. Perfect, even. My best work. And once his knee was fixed, he should, with rehab, make a full recovery. He was fit and healthy, and his bones were strong. He'd bounce back quicker than most people. So why did it feel like my ribs were crushing my organs, my lungs tight, my heart heavy? Hunter turned the faucet on and started soaping up next to me. It was a good surgery. You did an excellent job. I started on my other hand. Thank you. We'll fix his knee. I know. He turned to me. He'll play again. We'll get him back for next season. I know. He grabbed my shoulders, covering me in soap as he spun me round to face him. Molly, snap out of it for fuck's sake. I looked up at him, his eyes searching and open with frustration. I sighed deeply and heavily,
I know. I do know. It's just, yeah, it's hard working on a friend. That's why you're not supposed to do it. He pointedly arched a brow at me. But you're good. This was an excellent surgery, and you did an amazing job. So snap out of this mood you're in, because it's not you. You're a surgeon. Act like one. He started washing his hands again, and I waited while he rinsed and dried before heading out of the operating suites to the nurse's station. A few were gathered around the desk as we walked over. I didn't miss the younger nurses smoothing their hair down when they clocked Tantor. He's super weird and slimy. I looked at them all, putting Felix's paperwork on the counter. Who is? Oh, some resident that's covering for Mercy this week. Betty picked up the charts I'd left. Dr. Marks, Felix Cleverly's teammates, are waiting in room 4. Great, thank you. Hunter. I waited for him to stop what he was doing. You want to come and tell the boys the news? Excitement flashed in his eyes before he could stop it, his cool composure slipping for a nanosecond. Sure, why not? I pushed Felix's door open. The lights were dimmed down, the flashing of the heart monitor illuminating the room. He was fast asleep, breathing softly, his arm outstretched to stop the IV tubes getting tangled up. I walked over and switched the volume off, silence descending over the room, bringing an overwhelming sense of tiredness with it. In my years of training, I'd learned to survive without sleep, grabbing it whenever I could. But I couldn't remember a time I'd felt more tired than I did right now. My body sucked dry of any trace of adrenaline to push it through. I pulled a chair up to his bed, watching his chest rise and fall. I subconsciously started fiddling with my necklace, sliding the charm back and forth as my eyes started drooping, mesmerized by his breathing. I tried to keep them open as long as I could, but it became impossible. I woke to the sensation of fingers running through my hair, my head on the bed, resting on my arms. I must have fallen forward. What time was it? How long had I been here? Molly. Fingertips brushed over my forehead and I sat up with a jerk. Felix's eyes were open and looking down on me. Hey. I stood up, holding his wrist and checking his pulse. Can I get you anything? Just water, he croaked. I turned to the side, pouring him a cup and handing it to him. He gulped it down quickly, giving it back to me for a refill, which he also knocked back. What are you doing here? I was checking on you. I didn't want you to wake up alone. The corner of his lip curled in a soft smile, his eyelids closing as they did. Thank you. You're welcome. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a fucking bus. I took the morphine drip and put it in his hand. Here. When you need more pain meds, click on this button and it'll administer them automatically. He clicked on it like it was his Xbox controller, making me laugh. You only need to do it once. It cuts off when you've reached your maximum dosage. His head fell back onto the pillow and I leaned over him, pulling out my little pocket flashlight, flicking the light across one of his eyes before moving on to the other, checking his pupils for reaction. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist, holding my palm in place against his cheek. He looked up at me, his gaze earnest and searching, and I could feel his breath like a warm summer breeze across my skin, pebbling goosebumps in its wake. You're so beautiful, Ma. His cerulean eyes turned cobalt in the darkened room as they locked onto mine, and I stopped breathing as his other hand slid up my free arm and around the back of my neck, pushing up into my hair, twisting around it. His head lifted as he pulled mine down to meet him, stopping with a hair's breadth between us. I've always wondered what your lips would feel like against mine. His words were a whisper against my mouth, soft and feather-light before he pressed his onto mine, slowly deepening his touch and surrounding mine, his lips taking hold, alleviating me of my senses and any form of resistance.
His lips parted and his tongue licked.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?